Valeria Marquez, a beauty influencer in Mexico, shot dead while streaming live on TikTok. She was just 23 years old. In the disturbing footage, you can see Valeria sitting inside her salon in suburban Guadalajara, clutching a stuffed toy. She mutes the audio as the killer appears to step inside. We won't show the graphic moment, but the live stream goes dark. Earlier in the footage, a concerned Valeria tells fans someone dropped by the salon with an expensive gift for her when she wasn't there. That suspect is reportedly being sought for what's being called an act of gender-based femicide.
Femicide is an envious epidemic. And shout out to the TikTok user who asked me to talk about this case, and I'd actually seen it a couple days ago, and I felt compelled to seize the opportunity to actually make a full analysis about this rather than just making this only a TikTok video, because this is clearly something that's becoming more and more evident, and I believe that there are some overlapping red flags when it comes to social media influencers particularly. And with Valeria being, our case study today, I want to talk a little bit more about taking envy more seriously and becoming familiar with these signs, with these red flags. So if you are not familiar with them, I'm going to reference a lot of the signs in certain envious archetypes and things like that in this analysis a little bit later on. But one thing that I want people to become aware of is this: if you are a person who is the jack of all trades, you have so many valuable assets and characteristics. These traits not only attract opportunities, but they typically attract quote unquote opponents. And what I mean by that is there are going to be people who are looking at you with a jealous and envious eye. So not necessarily saying that you have to become paranoid, but you just have to be a little bit more strategic. It's a slippery slope because a lot of the time they will try to back you into a corner and make you so fearful to where you don't utilize your talents. So these particular cases are exceptional and they're unique because you have to implement a balancing act where you're utilizing your gifts and your talents and you're not allowing people to intimidate you out of utilizing your potential. But at the same time, you have to be very strategic when it comes to access and implementing some kind of exclusivity measure just to protect yourself from instances such as this. And to elaborate a little bit more, I'm actually going to start reading from some excerpts in the books to provide some concrete details and examples to look out for in situations like this. Also, for individuals who aren't familiar with a completely different analysis where I dissected this concept of being the jack of all trades and how it ignites jealousy, I'm also going to post that video in my community post, so feel free to look over there and watch that analysis as well if you haven't already. So an excerpt I want to revisit in the book Green Eyes is the Stages of Envy excerpt, because I think that this is what will help people differentiate whether or not someone maybe just is intimidated by, some of their skills or some of the resources that they have versus someone who is internalizing your success as a personal failure and they feel this need to take action in order to alleviate these negative feelings. And the excerpt reads, aside from providing theoretical content, let's dive into some context. How can we identify an envious person and take necessary precautions? Well, let's identify a general sequence. Envy is often a result of progressive instances. More often than not, envy presents itself in a prevalent sequence. Through mere observation, this book identifies 5 concrete stages that seem to be consistent regarding interactions with envious persons. The stages are also sequential. And the first stage is admiration, and it lists that adoration, inspiration, and attraction are some of the key elements. And then it reads, this is the stage where the envious person is seemingly enamored by you and what you have to offer. This can be your talents, your looks, your relationships. The envious person will admire these positive attributes initially. Then you proceed to stage 2, which is coveting. And this stage is immediately following the admiration stage because it's when the reality sinks in for the envious person. This is when they realize that admiring your positive attributes is really them trying to live vicariously through them. When they face this harsh reality that they are not you, bitterness will begin to sink in. The feelings of adoration quickly shift to feelings of covetousness. Then third, we have the competition stage. And it reads that covetousness then leads to the next stage, competition. This is where an envious person aims to compete with the person in hopes of attaining what they have or outperforming a person they are envious of. Stage 4 is jealousy, and it reads when they realize that competing with the subject of envy is unsuccessful, the envious individual is then faced with another harsh reality. Competing is an unsuccessful strategy. See, this is the stage where it starts to get dangerous. At this point, feelings of jealousy have come to the surface. Actions will then become petty, cold, calculated, and conniving. Stage 5 is envy, and it reads unsuccessful attempts on all platforms include an inability to outperform their target of envy and the inability to defeat or derail their target. Actions in retaliation will then become irate, irrational, misguided, impulsive, and sloppy, such as what was presented in the case of Valeria Marquez, where obviously her attacker came into her place of business, right? Now, mind you, 9 times out of 10, a lot of salons, a lot of businesses, especially with the physical location, they have cameras, they have surveillance. Or for example, if you're renting out a suite within like a commercial estate, a commercial building, there are at least surveillance cameras around the commercial estate at large, or security. So when you're dealing with someone who has reached this full-blown state of envy, actions such as what was presented in Valeria's case becomes more and more prevalent, right? Also, another red flag is the fact that this young woman was clearly on live, or at the very least, if the person walking in to, commit the crime the way that they did, if they saw her speaking on the phone to someone, right? On the phone, it could be FaceTime or something like that. That is still record of her having some kind of communication with someone else on the other line, and that person probably providing or being able to provide some details. So all of these things are just red flags of someone who has reached the state of envy, and obviously their actions are clearly irrational. And it's because typically they're operating from an emotionally intoxicated state. Once they are so consumed with their target of envy, they convince themselves it doesn't matter what the repercussions are, as long as I get this person out of here. Another thing that I want to highlight, and I mentioned this earlier, is being the jack of all trades specifically. I can't remember which analysis I recently posted where I talked about how people will test your boundaries, right? So if you are a woman, for example, and you're in an environment, you're amongst a group, you're accessing certain social networks, understand that there are exceptional cases when people perceive the fact that you bring more than one valuable asset to the table. You have to be mindful of individuals who take this as a personal offense. They feel offended at the fact that you bring valuable assets. They feel offended at the fact that they can't find chip in your armor, right? So, and it's not necessarily to say that a person is perfect, but we have to acknowledge the fact that there are people who will put certain individuals on a pedestal with the sole purpose of knocking them off of it. And simply you coming in, your presence alone is what will establish this dynamic. And the moment that someone feels like it's difficult to kick you off of this pedestal that they're trying to put you on with the sole purpose of knocking you off of it, this can also be better understood by reading some other excerpts in the same book titled The Set You Up to Fail Tactic and the Pull the Rug Technique. But when you find yourself in an environment where you're having interactions with people and you don't even understand, you haven't been able to perceive the fact that this person is trying to build you up to break you down. And it's because they feel like they can't find that one thing about you that would make them feel a little bit better about their life or maybe their shortcomings. And it's a dangerous situation because you're too busy minding your own business. You're too busy catering to your responsibilities, your relationships. You don't even understand that this person is having an entire battle with themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because they are trying to convince themselves that their envy is indicative of you all having some kind of relationship with one another. And it's almost like they're trying to justify these negative feelings by associating themselves with you only to harm you. So I also want to read from a couple of other excerpts in two different books that I reference all the time on this channel to talk a little bit more about how people will put you in a compromising situation when they realize that they cannot knock you off of this pedestal. And I believe that was also prevalent in the excerpt that we just now read from, the jealousy stage and then the envy stage. But I want to talk about a tactic that they will often use where they either invite themselves to a place that they feel like you frequent, or they will intentionally invite you somewhere and it's to pose an attack against you. I've referenced this on several other occasions, but understand when you're dealing with an envious person, the reason why they will pose some kind of attack to you, it could be physical, it could be a relational attack. They're trying to sabotage your relationships, your reputation. It's because they've convinced themselves that in order to alleviate their feelings of envy, they have to pose a constant threat to their target of envy. And one way that they will do this is organizing some kind of attack, and in this case, unfortunately, it was a physical attack, in an attempt to alleviate those feelings. And I'm going to go ahead and read from a couple of excerpts to dissect this concept more. The first excerpt I'm going to read from is titled The Insidious Invitation, and it reads, envious individuals often employ strategies to gain insight into their targets, carefully gauging the best attack mode. Invitations, enthusiastic or flattering, must be scrutinized before acceptance. These individuals use compliments or suggestions to engage with you more closely. However, they aim to push you out of your comfort zone, lower your defenses, and analyze what drives or influences you. Such invitations also encourage you to inadvertently reveal how you conduct yourself and who you align with. All of this information is used to craft an effective strategy against you. The final excerpt I want to read from is in the book Green Eyes, and it reads The Big Reveal, aka Sneak Attack. It states, this is a tactic that often reveals someone who is envious of you and may completely blindside you. Whether it be you don't know the individual or you had no idea you are on their radar. The big reveal often occurs after a sneak attack, where a known enemy or envious individual pairs up with someone who you had no idea doesn't like you or is envious of you. Since it is a sneak attack, it may be difficult to avoid or know exactly when it will occur. However, the preemptive measure to take is to always anticipate an attack from the person whom you have sensed or has proven to be envious of you. So what both of these excerpts are getting at is envious people need access to their target of envy. And that's why they will fight so hard to attain that access. And even if, in Valetia's case specifically, she did not know this person, which is also really common. That excerpt also depicted that. There are instances where you don't know an individual and you definitely don't know that you're on their radar. They're just watching you from afar with an envious eye. Understand that if you have had instances of envious attacks in the past, utilize these experiences for future reference. Not to become cynical or jaded, but to understand how people will go to great lengths to attack someone that they're envious of. And it's always better to be safe rather than sorry. And I wanted to provide some concrete steps, especially for women who they are pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors because they've experienced some kind of attack in professional settings, right? So they're just like, okay, well, I'll go into business. I'll become an influencer. Hence why I strongly encourage social media influencers. My beautiful business babes, please become familiar with necessary resources so that you are up on game and so you can start to perceive these tactics and strategies from a mile away. But for example, if you are a business owner and you have a physical location, hire staff. If you have a physical location, please hire staff, okay? Another thing that's important is do random and brief check-ins, and please do not broadcast your check-ins when you show up to your physical location, okay? If you want to do promo, post it after the fact, after you have left, and do not have an easy to follow schedule, all right? Another thing to take note of is this, and this is specific to, my business babes with physical locations, salons, suites, such as Valeria. Rent out suites with a concierge and a front desk. where desk employees can take items on your behalf, gifts, items, or they have some kind of mailbox for you. This provides a buffer so you're able to at least gauge who is coming to try to visit you or drop something off to you. And a lot of the time, depending on where you're renting out your suite or your salon, you'll be able to see on the camera who's like downstairs. So make sure that you have those things in check beforehand. And last but not least, do your best, do your absolute best to work in a salon, to rent out a suite, or to rent out a building in a commercial estate that has security, that has paid security on staff. Also, if you're in, for example, I know there are some suites that are more so outside, but there are other suites that are like in a building, they're inside. I wish I could explain it a little bit better. But in these instances, vet out salons and suites where there is a metal detector when you walk in. There are places where that is also an option. So when you start to embark on your entrepreneurial endeavors, make sure that you take these things into consideration before you start your business, okay? And these things are designed to not necessarily make you closed off to people, but to have some kind of protective measure in place, because there are strangers who are looking at you with an envious eye. They resent you, they don't know you, and they're just like, wow, I really wish that I was this person. And some people, they feel inspired, other people feel envious. So just be on the lookout. Sending all of my love and prayers to Valeria Marquez's family, her friends, her loved ones. And I'm also praying for you all. Stay vigilant, you all. I'm sending you guys so much love. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Take care, babes.